We don't rush this one. Some stories announce themselves loudly. This one didn't. It arrived the way real exclusions usually do, quiet, polite, almost careful. Claire Maddox is the kind of person people depend on without thinking about it. A senior marketing lead who keeps campaigns moving and emotions contained. What happened to her mattered not because it was dramatic, but because it was precise. This is how she remembers it. The envelope was heavier than the rest of the mail. Not thick, just deliberate. Cream paper. My brother's handwriting. Careful in the way he only gets when something matters to him. I stood in the lobby longer than necessary, flipping it once, then again, like the weight might explain itself if I gave it time. Back upstairs. I dropped my keys on the counter and opened it with my thumb. There was no invitation inside, no date card, no venue map, just a single insert. Adults only ceremony and reception. That was it. I didn't laugh. I didn't feel confused. I felt something settle, clean and sharp. This is how she's doing it, I said out loud to an empty kitchen. Evelyn never liked confrontation. She preferred labels. Adults only wasn't about age. It was about who qualified as calm, polished, acceptable. It was about who she had already decided I wasn't. My phone buzzed before I could sit down. Drew. I answered. You got the note. His voice sounded careful, already tired. I did. A pause stretched between us. It's just the wording the venue requires. I stared at the paper again. You didn't send me an invitation. Another pause. Longer this time. Claire, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. I didn't. I said. You did. From the channel side. The silence was doing more work than either of them. I just want one day without tension. He added, that's all. I closed my eyes. Then, you should have said that out loud. He exhaled. Slow. We'll talk later. I have a meeting. The call ended without a goodbye. I sat at the table and flattened the insert with my palm, smoothing a crease that wasn't there. I thought about all the times Drew showed up without being asked. The nights he drove hours because I sounded off. The way he used to stand a little in front of me when things felt uncertain. That version of my brother would have fought harder than a piece of paper. I folded the insert once and slid it back into the envelope. If this story resonates, you're welcome to stay with it. Some chapters take time to unfold. I reached for my phone again. Not to call anyone this time, but to silence the family group chat before the photos started. Drew wasn't always like this. That's the part that keeps looping back when I try to make sense of it. Not the wedding, not the note. Him. When our parents split, Drew moved home every other weekend like it was an obligation he chose on purpose. He'd knock once, then let himself in, drop his bag by the door, and say, "You eat yet?" as if that solved something. Most of the time. It did. I remember one night in high school when I locked myself in the bathroom after a fight with Mom. Drew sat on the floor outside the door for almost an hour. "You don't have to talk," he said through the wood. "Just don't disappear on me." I opened the door eventually. He didn't look relieved. He just stood up, like he knew I would. That was Drew. Conversations that turned careful, like he was choosing words from a limited menu. The first time I met Evelyn, we were at dinner. She smiled, quick and practiced, then asked Drew about a case he was working on. She didn't ask me anything, not once. When I spoke anyway, she nodded, polite, already waiting to talk again. Later, when I brought it up, Drew waved it off. She's just reserved. She didn't look at me. She's like that with new people. I let it go. That was my habit. Over time, I started noticing how often Drew checked her face before answering a question, how he softened his voice around her, how our old shorthand disappeared, replaced by explanations. The brother who used to stand in front of me now stood somewhere else, angled away, like he didn't trust himself to hold both worlds at once. By the time the envelope arrived, the distance was already there. The paper just made it official. The first time Evelyn talked about the wedding in front of me, It sounded casual. We were in Drew's kitchen. I'd brought wine. She poured it carefully, stopping just short of the rim, like that was a principle. Drew hovered near the counter, opening and closing a drawer that didn't need anything. "We're keeping it very contained," Evelyn said, setting her glass down. "Intimate. Clean." "Clean," I repeated, mostly to keep my voice steady. She smiled, quick again. "Smaller guest lists help people relax. Drew gets overwhelmed when there's too much emotion in a room." Drew glanced up. "I do." She reached for his arm. "You know you do. You've always said that." He nodded, almost relieved. "Yeah, I guess I have." I watched it happen in real time. A version of him being handed back to himself, already edited. Later, when he walked me to the door, I asked quietly, "Do you feel overwhelmed around me?" He hesitated, just a beat too long. "It's not about you," he said. "Evelyn just wants things to be smooth." Smooth meant expensive venues and firm boundaries. It meant her parents handling most of the planning. It meant phrases like guest capacity and agreed lists slipping into conversation like facts no one could challenge. "She's under a lot of pressure," Drew added. "Her family's paying for most of it. They have expectations." I nodded. I understood leverage. I worked in corporate marketing. Budgets always came with opinions. The next time I saw Evelyn, she pulled Drew aside mid-conversation. Her hand rested lightly on his back. "You're clenching your jaw," she murmured. "You do that when you're stressed." "I'm fine. Just saying, today should feel easy for you." He softened immediately. "You're right. From the channel's perspective, it was subtle. The kind of thing people miss if they're not looking for it." I stood there, wine untouched, realizing something uncomfortable. This wasn't about excluding me because she disliked me. It was about removing variables. And in her version of the day, I was one. I tried Drew once more the next morning. Straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message this time. My voice would have given me away. I called my mother instead. She picked up on the third ring, breath already shallow, like she'd been holding it. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, sweetheart." A pause, paper shifting on her end. "I wondered when you'd call." "So you knew." Another pause. "Longer." "I found out after everything was mostly set." She said, "I did say something." "What did you say that it might hurt you?" And she said it wasn't personal. A soft sigh. That the ceremony needed to stay calm. I leaned against the counter, fingers pressing into the edge. Did Drew say anything? He looked uncomfortable. That was it. That was the defense. I stared at the envelope still sitting on the table. The words, "adults only," face down now, like I was trying to spare myself. "Are you going?" My voice came out flatter than I expected. "Yes," no hesitation, just yes. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Okay?" She rushed in then, like she felt it slipping. "You know how weddings are. Everyone's stressed. It doesn't mean anything about how much they love you." I waited, let the quiet stretch. "Mom," I said finally, keeping my tone steady. "If this were Drew being left out, would you still go?" Her breath caught. I heard it through the phone, sharp and unmistakable. Then nothing. Seconds passed. Maybe more. "Mom, I don't think that's fair," she said, voice thinner now. "This isn't the same." I closed my eyes. You didn't answer. She didn't argue. She didn't explain. The line stayed open, filled with small sounds, a chair moving, a door closing somewhere in the background. "I love you," she said eventually, too quickly. "I know." We hung up without saying goodbye. From the channel's side, the quiet after the call lingered longer than the conversation itself. I stood there for a minute, then folded the envelope again, slower this time. I slid it into a drawer instead of the trash. I wasn't ready to pretend it hadn't happened. The family group chat buzzed on my phone. I turned notifications off, one setting at a time. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful, but it was honest. Drew called that evening while I was chopping onions I didn't need for a dinner I didn't want. His name lit up my phone. I wiped my hands on a towel and answered. Hey. He sounded cautious, like he was stepping onto ice he didn't trust. I've been in back-to-back meetings, of course. Silence settled in. I could hear traffic on his end, a horn, someone laughing nearby. I didn't mean for it to come out like that, he said. The note. There was only one way it could come out. He exhaled. Claire. It's complicated. I leaned against the counter. The knife stayed where it was. I'm listening. He hesitated, then pushed through. Evelyn's parents are paying for most of the wedding. They had conditions. Guest count, atmosphere. They want it calm, and I'm not. That's not what I said. It's what happened. Another pause. I pictured him rubbing his forehead, the way he does when he's cornered. She thinks you bring a lot of emotion into rooms, he said quietly. She worries it makes me tense. I laughed once, sharp and short. So she decided I shouldn't be there. She framed it as protecting me. And you let her. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was lower. I hate conflict. You know that. I know. I just wanted one day without it. I closed my eyes. The kitchen smelled like onion and something burnt. It's just one day to you. That's not fair. It is accurate. He shifted, like he was walking now. Footsteps echoed. You're taking this really personally. I opened my eyes. You sent me a message saying I don't belong at your wedding. How else would I take it? That's not what it says. It's what it means. He sighed. I didn't think it would hurt this much. That's part of the problem. The line went quiet again. When he spoke, there was something brittle underneath. I wish you could just let this go. I felt my chest tighten, then loosen. I've let a lot go. I'm not choosing her over you. You already did. That's not Drew. I kept my voice steady. The version of you who used to show up would have fought this. He didn't argue. The absence of denial said enough. From the channel's side, this was the moment things tipped, not loudly. Just enough. I love you, he said finally. It's just one day. I rested my hand on the counter, grounding myself. It's a statement. He didn't have a response ready. The call ended soon after. No resolution, no promise. I stood there a while after, listening to the quiet apartment. The onions never made it into the pan. The next morning, I went to work, not because I was fine, but because routine was the only thing I had left to control. I tied my hair back tight, answered emails on autopilot, and tried to bury the adults-only note under a mountain of spreadsheets. By mid-morning, my manager, Marcus, stopped by my desk. He didn't look at my screen. He looked at me. Walk with me, he said, in the conference room. He didn't waste time. You've got over 4 weeks of accrued leave. Claire, in this industry, that's not a badge of honor. It's a liability. You're redlining. The Q4 launch is weeks away. I started, my voice defensive. I can't just leave the campaigns in mid-air. We'll reroute the campaigns, he countered. The team needs to learn to fly without you, and you need to remember how to breathe without a KPI hanging over your head. Go somewhere where you don't have to be useful for a minute. I felt a sudden, sharp crack in my resolve. I don't even know where I'd go. Anywhere that isn't here, he said, opening the door. That night, I sat in my quiet Capitol Hill apartment. I didn't book a desperate one-way flight. I booked an open-jaw ticket from Seattle to Lisbon, with a flexible return from Porto. It was a professional's escape, spontaneous, yet strategically sound for customs. I packed slowly, a few pairs of jeans, a notebook I'd been saving for a life that hadn't started yet. Just as I was zipping the bag, my phone buzzed. The family group chat lit up with a photo of the wedding seating chart. I didn't open it. I muted the thread. Then the individual notifications, one by one. This wasn't an escape. It was a recalibration. I sat on the edge of my bed, suitcase by the door, and for the first time in weeks, the noise in my head finally lowered a notch. Not peace, not yet, but space. Lisbon hit me all at once. Heat, noise, bodies moving with purpose while I stood there holding my bag like I'd forgotten something important. I followed the crowd out of the airport and realized no one knew who I was or why I looked slightly undone. That helped more than I expected. The first panic came on a side street near my hotel. I'd been walking too long without meaning to. Phone in my hand, checking the time back home. A message slipped through before I muted everything. Mom dress fitting today. Navy. Drew says the venue looks incredible. My chest tightened fast. My vision narrowed. I leaned against a wall until my breathing slowed enough to count. A woman selling flowers nearby stepped closer. She didn't ask questions, just held out a small cup of water and waited until I took it. "Obrigada," I said, my voice thin. She smiled like that was enough. I muted the family group chat right there. Every thread, every update. My phone went quiet in a way it hadn't been in years. A few days later, on a train heading north, I met Noah. He asked if the seat across from me was free and didn't flinch when I nodded without looking up. "You traveling or running?" he asked, half smiling. "Both," I admitted. He didn't push, just took his camera out of his bag and started cleaning the lens. In Porto, we ended up grabbing coffee with Eliza and Lucas, people who talked easily about where they'd been and where they weren't sure they were going next. No one asked for context. No one needed an explanation. On Madeira, the air felt different, slower. I started carrying my notebook everywhere, writing things that didn't connect yet. I borrowed Noah's camera one afternoon, surprised by how steady my hands were when I focused on something outside myself. At a coastal wildlife preserve, I watched a monk seal pull her pup closer as the wind picked up. She positioned herself without hesitation, blocking the worst of it with her body. No ceremony, no negotiation. I stood there longer than necessary. "That's instinct," Noah said quietly beside me. "Not strategy." I nodded. My throat felt tight. From the channel's side, this was where the story stopped chasing pain and started observing it. That night, back at the hostel, I turned my phone on long enough to check the date. Drew's wedding was close now. I turned it back off. For once, the distance didn't feel like loss. It felt like perspective. I woke before my alarm. The room was dim, the kind of quiet that feels intentional. I knew what day it was without checking my phone. I headed out early, walking until the hostel was far behind. The cliffs of Madeira overlooked the Atlantic, gray and steady. The wind was stronger up there, biting through my jacket. Back home in Seattle, it was nearly midnight. The ceremony was over. The reception was likely winding down into a blur of champagne and tired feet. My phone vibrated. I let it pulse in my pocket for 5 long seconds before pulling it out. Drew's name. I answered. "Hello?" "Claire." His voice was loose, floating. In the background, I could hear the muffled thrum of a hotel ballroom's bass. "I'm on the balcony of the suite. Everyone's finally gone." I leaned against the cold iron railing, watching the sunrise break over the ocean. "You sound drunk, Drew." "I had to be," he whispered. He laughed once, a hollow sound. I kept looking at the door. Every time it opened, I thought you'd just show up, like you used to. "I'm not a variable you can just plug in when you feel guilty," I said. A pause. The wind rushed through the receiver. I messed this up. Hales. I should have fought her. I thought I could just fix it with you later. That's the problem. You always choose the path of least resistance and expect me to be the safety net. He was quiet. "I miss you." Before I could breathe, a sharper voice cut through. Close. Cold. Drew. "Who are you talking to?" I heard the phone shift. "It's my sister," he said, his voice instantly tightening. "It's our wedding night." Evelyn's voice was unmistakable, even through the speaker. "Hang up the phone. Now." "I just need a minute." No, we're done with the drama. Hang up." Drew's breath hit the receiver one last time. "I'll call you when we get back from Bali. I promise." "I know," I said. I didn't say I'd be waiting. The call ended. I stood there as the sun fully emerged, turning the gray water into gold. I didn't feel angry. I felt a strange, terrifying lightness. The center of my gravity had finally moved. That night, back at the hostel, Noah handed me a beer without a word. "Big day." "The biggest," I said, and for the first time, I meant it for myself. Seattle felt smaller when I returned. Not worse, just tighter. Like I could finally see the edges of the box I had been living in. I unpacked with a deliberate slowness. I placed my travel notebook on the kitchen table instead of hiding it in a drawer. The camera Noah had lent me sat by the window for a few days, a quiet reminder that I could see the world through my own lens now. Drew texted a week later. "Back from Bali. Coffee this weekend." I stared at the screen. A month ago, a text from him was a high-stakes event. Now, it was just data. I typed back neutral ground, Sunday at 10. When we met, he looked older. The newlywed glow was absent, replaced by a fatigue that seemed structural. "You look different," he said, nursing his black coffee. "Less guarded." Portugal agreed with me. I replied, "It turns out I'm quite good at being my own anchor." He looked down at his mug. "About the wedding. Claire, I'm sorry. I knew it was a mistake the moment the ceremony started." I raised my hand, stopping the familiar cycle of excuses. "I believe you, Drew, but I'm done with apologies for things that are already broken. Moving forward, I need consistency. I need a brother who shows up, not one who regrets not showing up." He didn't argue. For the first time in years, he just listened. Weeks passed. I established new KPIs for my life. I left work at 5:00 p.m. I joined a hiking group and spent my Saturdays chasing the light with a camera of my own. One evening, I posted a shot of Mount Rainier reflected in a glacial lake. Drew liked it within minutes. The notification appeared, but the usual spike of anxiety the need for his validation didn't follow. Claire Maddox wasn't uninvited from a wedding. She was released from a role that kept her small. Some endings aren't loud, they just make room. And for the first time, I had all the space I needed.